All right, now we are ready to move on to our next script. So if you've made a level, you probably very quickly noticed that we have a problem with our code, which is that the camera does not follow the player. That's no good. I want that camera, in my case, my level is sort of horizontal. I want that camera to move, move along with the player in this kind of platformy side view of my game, but you maybe made a different level or a maze or something. And the camera maybe be more above or wherever you want. But however you want to arrange it, we still need to solve for this problem of the camera following the player. So this is going to be our next script that we're going to write is a behavior that will allow one game object to follow another. Now, you might be wondering why make this a script? If we remember, or maybe don't remember, if you're just jumping straight into this one, but elsewhere there is content that explains the parent and child relationships. One way we could make the camera follow the player is by making the camera a child of the player. So now the camera its position is now relative to the, not the scene, but to the player. So wherever the player is, the child will be this position, this many units away from that position. About centered up, 10 units, above, 22 units back. That seems like what it is. Maybe I want it even higher up or rotated less. Something like that. I don't know, whatever. But we're very quickly, this is going to work at first, but we're very quickly going to discover the problem with it once I start moving. So, not great. Because the position of the player and the rotation of the player are both tracked, right? We can't make the camera, we could make a child game object and then have a camera be at that position to that game object and like every frame reset its orientation to be vertical, but in world space, but every time to do that, we would need to write our own script anyway. So we're going to write our own script anyway. So no matter what, having the right behavior needs custom movement. So unless you're making a first-person shooter game, it's generally a good practice to keep the camera a separate object from the player, unless the player is the camera, like in an FPS. So we're going to make a new script. We're going to call it camera follow. Pretty descriptive name for our behavior. It's actually not great. We're going to rename it in the future once we figure out why it can be better, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But right now we're going to, our best guess at this name is something that describes what this behavior does, which is the camera follows player. So in order for this script to work, we need to set, we're going to use the update loop. Every single frame, we are going to change the position of the camera's transform. So we need a reference to this camera's position, this transform. And we need a reference to this player's position. And we are going to set the camera's position to be equal to whatever the player's position is, plus some offset, plus some 10 units up, 22 units back, offset away from the player. So to do that, we need a reference to this transform. We'll do that last because it's the easiest one. We need a reference to the player's transform. So we're going to make a variable that's going to hold onto this reference. And that variable is going to be of type transform. So transform is the name of the transform component, and we will call this player. It is private, but if we make it public, then I will be able to, let's go to the main camera. Add camera follow. This script is going to be on the camera, not on the player. The camera is the thing that this behavior belongs to, is it's following something. The player is not the thing that, it's getting followed. So maybe it tells something else to go look over there and point at itself. But in my head, this is a behavior that belongs to the camera. Plus being able to change the target could be really important. You might want to have the camera switch to looking at a treasure chest and switch back at the beginning of the level, or I don't know, something like that. So it makes sense to put this type of behavior on the camera. We could do this from inside player movement, but player movement, as elucidated by the name I gave it, it should be responsible just for moving the player. General Unity development has us splitting our components up into as many small pieces as possible, each one responsible for just one behavior. We add a component, it adds a behavior to our thing, to our game object. So our camera follow script, we can put this on our camera and it will follow some player, some target. And the last thing we need to make it work is some offset. And we will make that with a vector3 offset. We need a reference to the current transform. And we could do the same thing we did with the rigid body. Don't copy this code. We're going to delete it in a second. We can call it like my transform, and then my transform equals get component transform. And then we could use it. My transform dot position equal, blah, 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 blah. We'll get to that in a second. But turns out it's very silly to do this because Unity and any component, any Mahano behavior already comes with a reference to the current game object's transform, to whatever game object that this script is attached to the transform that is on the same game object. We already have a baked in reference to that component. And that reference is simply transform. Lowercase t, this variable already exists. If I called this variable transform with a lowercase t, I would get a little warning that it hides a property transform from the parent because I'm now replacing that variable with a new variable of the same name. So whoops, this one's the player. This one's, we don't need that. I once was looking back on some of my old code and I once had a get component transform call and I was looking at it like, weird, silly. Like it makes perfect sense. I need to get a transform component reference. I will use the get component for the transform, but like, no. Every game object has a transform, so every transform variable exists. They're never going to be null. We're good to go. Okay. So in update, we now need to set our position equal to the position of the player plus an offset. So that is our position, transform dot, and we can actually take a look at the documentation for the transform component. I can click this button, or I can actually go to the transform and click a little health question mark right there. And that will open up the manual on it. We switch to scripting. We get a list of all of the variables that the transform has, including one called position, which is this world space of the transform. Position, rotation, and local scale are the three variables that we have exposed here in the editor. So now that we know that, we can take our position and set it equal to our player. And this is another transform. It's the same component, just a different one. And it thus has all of the same properties that the transform components have, including a position property. That should be in equal sign plus some offset. And we just do that every frame in update. So my offset's going to be like 10, negative 22, something like that. And my player is going to be drag and drop player. If that is empty, I will get errors. I will get so many errors. So we're going to assign it. So now my camera, just via me dragging and dropping into the Unity editor, my camera now knows the correct game object to follow. And now we have a working camera follow script where our camera does not spin wildly out of control. We're not done yet. We can make it better. We can make it better in a few simple ways that explaining helps me explain sort of the many good Unity practices. One thing we could do is if we always know that the player is, we don't always know that what we want to follow is the player. Sorry, we don't know that the player is the thing the camera wants to follow. In fact, this script can be used not just for the camera, but for anything to follow any other object with some offset. So we're going to rename player to target. If you have JetBrains Writer installed, you can hit Shift F6 on something to rename it, and I'll open that menu via the right-click, refactor, rename command, and I will choose target. and I will not do a formally serialized as. So I will change this to target. And now transform.position equals target. It renamed it here as well, target.position. You could also just go in and change the name. Because remember, the only thing that matters is the text. At the end of the day, writer doesn't matter for Unity. Let's reassign our value. The second thing we can do is calculate this offset. If I wanna move my camera to like the perfect position where I want the player to be, in the view, if I move it to the perfect position, right, and I say, yes, this is perfect, and I hit play, well, it's gonna jump back to the thing that I told it to be. So I would need to, I would need some way to find that offset so that I can edit visually by just moving the camera around, and I don't have to edit my game by trying to figure out what these numbers should be, because that's annoying. So let's make life a little bit easy for ourselves, and we're going to calculate the offset property by using the position of the camera and the position of the player on the same frame. So if we think of A equals B plus C as E equals target plus offset, if me minus target equals target plus offset minus target, right? We just think of it as a basic algebra. We can figure out that offset should be our position minus our target's position, right? And that's how we can figure out the offset, right? It's the same equation. I'm just solving for offset. It's very easy to like try to do it, but flip it around the opposite way. And if you do that, actually that would work. If you do that, all you have to do is like, you just trial and error it. If you're like me and you're too lazy to do basic algebra, or like you don't have a scratch piece of paper on your desk, which by the way, you should all have scratch pieces of paper on your desk or a nearby whiteboard or something when you're working in Unity. It makes life so much easier for little things like that. I mean, that one you could probably do in your head, but there's little things like that all the time. Anyway, so now offset, we can look at it in the inspector. It's set to this incorrect value, but once I hit play, that start will happen. We'll change its value to this, and then update will happen, and it will set the camera's position accordingly. Nice. So now that this value is being set by Unity, I look at it here and I say, okay, I want the values to be this, to be something else. And I hit play, and then Unity immediately changes what I just typed in. Because of course it immediately changes what I just typed in. That's what it does here. So having something exposed to the user that looks like it's an editable, adjustable property, we don't want to do that when it's not actually an editable, adjustable, or necessary property. So we'll make that private, and it will go away. Lastly, we're going to rename our camera follow script. Now, again, I could use writer to rename it, Shift F6, and then that would rename the file as well. And I recommend you do things that way, but I'll show you the hard way just in case you don't have writer or whatever. Instead of camera follow, I'm going to change the name of this class to follow target. And here I would need to change the name of that in every single script that uses that type, which is none right now. But the other thing I have to remember to do is to rename my file. I just copied and pasted the name exactly so I couldn't mess it up. Follow target. I've lost my reference. It's looking for a camera follow script. There isn't one. Using the rename from writer actually will keep those like references active. So having those IDE tools can make your life a lot easier when you get into a tricky situation like trying to rename a script. But as you can see, by having lost that reference and having to rename a file and rename it in one and maybe hundreds of places, having the tools is very handy. But B, we really want to name our file as well because it can be kind of a pain to name them later. And that's just an important point to note. But follow target and having a target, not necessarily a player, not necessarily a camera, is really nice. So now I have the camera that moves with the player. That's it. There's the script. we did it. I'm going to show you one more other type of camera follow script. I'm going to create a new behavior. I'm going to call it look at target. And it's going to be a separate unique script, but instead of moving with the target, it will stay stationary and it will rotate towards the target. So we'll keep a target reference. And then we will simply use a reference to our transform that we already have. And we will use the look at function. And we'll just call that every frame and update. That's right. We didn't need to do any rotation math and figure out what the rotation would be to like find, like locate the blah, 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 blah. Very difficult, but this very easy. So maybe my main camera, I don't have a follow target. Instead, I have a look at target script and I need to make this public. I need to make this public to expose it, because if it's null, you will get the following error. Every single frame and update, you will get this runtime error. That it needs the target. Errors are good. We want errors that tell us what our mistakes are. Hello? Player. I added this to the wrong script. Maybe they were both selected and I hit add component. I don't know how I did that. But because of my errors, I was able to find my mistake quickly. I don't want that there. Wait, what? Player movement. Did I rename the wrong script? How did I do this? I renamed the wrong script. Look at target should be look at target. Okay. Who watched me do that and was like, what are you doing? You're doing this wrong. I'm not going to re-record the video. We're going to fix it because now we're fixing bugs. This is my player movement script. Player movement. There's already a player movement class. This is player movement. This is follow target. This is look at target. This is player movement. Didn't it work? Didn't I move? Maybe they were both. No, because it needs a rigid body. What happened? Didn't I test it? All right. Okay, well, let's just make sure the follow target works. I'm actually kind of glad that there's an error. Oh, I need to add the player movement to the player. Yeah, I should have been more confused when the script showed up on the player. Was I pushing a button? Was I already have a joystick plugged in? I should have been more confused when the script just suddenly showed up on the player and I just assumed I had like them both selected. No, it was already there. I had renamed the wrong one. Okay. Okay, player moves, camera follows, that works, and look at target player, that works. The code's all fine, just don't rename the wrong. Hey, and now the camera just rotates. If you wanted to give it an offset, like look above the player, so the player was on the bottom of the screen, you would just do, you know, you'd give it you'd just take the position and make some vector 3 offset to, that would be like that would be like 0, 4, 0 or something to find the position above the player. So this function can take a transform or it can take a vector 3 world coordinate position. Okay, anyway, that's it. Okay, I broke the code, I fixed the code. I showed you 2 different types of camera follows, and we didn't touch player movement, and we didn't break it either. Great.